Aren't there times when you want to talk about everything? Sometimes talking about anything is very therapeutic. And don't forget about talking about, well, nothing. Sometimes it's about just listening to what others have to say. Please join me for my podcast, Yada Yada Yada, a chat about everything, anything, and nothing. It's a great way of knowing about what's not coming next. What's up, guys? Julie Schrager here, Yada 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 podcast. Today, I just wanted to touch on something that I think many parents of uh, public or private school age are concerned about, and that is how our children are going to be educated in the 2020-2021 school year. Let me start off by telling you a quick little tidbit on my background with regard to virtual. When my son is now 24 years old. We moved here in 2001. We moved here because we really, really liked the schools. We liked the school district. We were very happy to move to Wellington. So my son started kindergarten and everything was fine. Everything was great. He did very well, no problems whatsoever. And then third grade hit. Third grade, the year of the FCAT, now called the FSA. So, what happened? Here we go. A quick summarization because I seriously can talk forever, hence the reason for a podcast. So, third grade comes. My son was in something called Project Child. Some of you that might be listening to this might remember it. Project Child was a lottery where only a certain amount of children were chosen to be in a particular class. Now, it started in kindergarten and went straight through fifth grade. However, in third grade, all of the children stayed with one another, but the teachers switched out. So there are three teachers, and when third grade came, these three teachers continued teaching K through second, and a whole new set of teachers started educating our children from third grade to fifth grade. Okay, so was I happy with some of these teachers? Absolutely not. Now, I am not going to be knocking any teachers because I know a lot of people that are teachers. I've got a lot of friends that are teachers, and I worked in the school district for 12 years. This is my own personal adaptation of what transpired. That's it. It's got nothing to do with teaching. It's got nothing to do with the person. It's just me telling you what transpired. So, in third grade, my son had to take his very first FCAT practice test. Fantastic. Okay. So, he destroyed it. He did not do well at all. My son had always been a good student, never did bad, never had any concerns. So once the FCAT came and he just did horrible, I was a little bit concerned, but not really. Why was I a little bit concerned? Because everyone and every teacher and every person I bumped into, it was all about FCAT, FCAT, FCAT. This is all it was about. And oh, if they fail, they're not going to be promoted. If they fail, then they're going to have to be maybe in a reading class the next year and they're going to miss out. Okay. So my son just did horribly. And as soon as the results came in, my phone started blowing up. Why? Okay. So it was his reading teacher, not his math teacher, his reading teacher. His reading teacher said, okay, every student that got below a 3, it was rated, the grades were 1 through 5. If you got a 3 through 5, you passed and you moved on to the next grade. Yippee. If you got below a 3, you had to either lose an elective and take a reading class or miss out on elementary school lessons. In this particular case, my son was told that he had to take a separate reading class, and therefore he was going to miss out on some history. I was not unhappy about this at all. As a matter of fact, I loved the reading teacher he had. I actually wished that she was his permanent teacher. However, because he was in this reading class, he did miss out on some history. He wound up not doing well in history because he didn't have the notes. The teacher did not supply him with anything that he might have missed, including the five other children. I'm sorry, total five children. So, including the four other children that were in this reading class as well. They all suffered in history. And I had to have, of course, a parent teacher conference where we discussed what could possibly be done. Uh, so, fine, third grade FCAT, end of the year, time to take the big test. Well, it wasn't the end of the year. I think it was like March or April. Okay, excuse me. Takes the test. As soon as the results came in, just like the practice test, I get a phone call. She was in the middle of teaching a lesson, my son's teacher, and the only thing she could think about was walking out of her classroom, calling me to say, I've got great news. Your son passed the FCAT. She was ecstatic. Me, on the other line, I said, Oh, okay, great. Thanks for calling. And there was a very long pause, as though she seemed to be a little upset about my reaction. I think that she might have wanted me to be a little bit more happy with these results. And all I'm thinking to myself is, why? Who cares about the FCAT? Who cares if a child does great or a child doesn't do great? That has nothing to do with their intellect. That has nothing to do with what they've learned. In my son's case, for example, he did not do well because of stress, because of anxiety. Why? Because that's all they focused on since kindergarten, preparing these children for a test. I'm not going to get into it because that's not what I wanted to talk about, really. Okay, fourth, fifth grade, passed the FCAT, great, everything's great. Then he moves into middle school. He gets into middle school, sixth grade, takes the FCAT, did not do well. They then had to put him into a reading class. So that meant that out of the two electives that he was allowed to choose from, one of those electives had to be reading. Honestly, my son really didn't care because he was fine with it. He didn't even care. I cared. He didn't. Okay, so he takes the reading class, passes the FCAT, fine. Fast forward, ninth grade, high school. My son, after the first semester and getting his grades, told me that he was not happy with how some of the teachers were teaching some of his classes. He said to me that two of his teachers just sat there and had him read from the textbook. Everyone else had to read from the textbook. He was failing shop. And why? Because his teacher made the children for the first semester, the entire first semester, sit in class and read the textbook and learn by themselves. Well, for many of you that don't know about SHOP, this particular course does have a lot of mathematical equations that encompass this course. Many mathematical equations that are not geometry, that are more kind of, I would say, advanced to the max algebra. And this wasn't taught. Some of these sequences were not taught on how to do it. And so when it came time for testing, what did the teacher have on there? Half of them were math examples. Well, guess what? My son, along with many of the other children, were not doing well. So he wound up uh, switching out of this particular class. And at the time, there was Palm Beach Virtual and Florida Virtual. And I had found out that he could uh, eliminate pretty much this class and take it over online. Well, not SHOP, but another course. So my son was not happy that he was actually failing this class because of the lack of teaching, but because he was really interested in it and really wanted to do SHOP like things. Well, that was not going to start until the second semester. So what did my son do? He spoke with his guidance counselor. They dropped the grade, but he still had to take something else. So he decided he was going to go on Florida Virtual and take it online and take Spanish online. So he dropped Spanish at school. And we managed to have some type of a schedule to where he was taking five classes there and two classes at home. So he kind of went into school a little bit later. Fine. After he passed with flying colors Spanish and SHOP, he realized at the end of the school year that he could actually do better on virtual and actually comprehend better online. And it showed in his grades. So when he became a sophomore, we decided as a family that he was going to take his main courses, his core courses, math, English, history, those types of courses he was going to take online. And he was going to continue going to high school and take his electives because he liked the electives that were offered at his high school. And he did not want to totally give up on being in high school and the social aspects of it. Needless to say, my son thrived in high school. He thrived. He did wonderful at school. He did wonderful online. Because he was doing half and half, there was still those little things where we had to find out, such as, well, how does he graduate? Does he graduate through high school? Does he graduate through Florida Virtual, which is the virtual schooling education that he decided to do rather than Palm Beach Virtual? No reason. He just liked it better. So how is he going to graduate? So we found out that he still needs to pass the FCAT. Okay. So then I had found a loophole because I'm a crazy analytical researcher. And I contacted his guidance counselor and did, in fact, find out something that he did not know, which was that if he were to pass the SAT or ACT at the time with a particular number, then that would take the place of the FCAT. Now, I don't know how things are now. Things might be exactly the same. But at the time, they would eliminate the FCAT grade as long as he got, I think at the time it was like a 17 on the ACT. Well, he not only got higher than a 17, but he did very well on the the SAT as well. So they were able to take this particular grade, and therefore he didn't have to take the FCAT to graduate. He decided to continue throughout the rest of high school to keep doing this course of action, taking his main courses on FLVS online and go to school and take his electives. It worked out great for him. Now, let me explain to you why it worked out great for my son. My son is a visual learner. So, for him, being able to go online and learn virtually was a lot easier. I shouldn't say easier, it was, I can't even find the words right now. But for him, he was able to, let's just say, adapt to learning in a more kind of one-on-one setting that he found with Florida Virtual that you just don't get at public school, charter school, or sometimes even private schools. It was a perfect combination for him to where he would have to teach himself at times, uh, but for the most part and at a higher percentage, he was able to be taught on Florida Virtual. There were blackboards. There was interaction with the teachers where they shared their computers and their whiteboard online, and they were able to show you exactly what you were basically having trouble with. It was the best of both worlds for him. And he wound up thriving and doing well. Now, let me also preface by saying that my son did have two wonderful tutors from two amazing girls who lived up the street from me for math. Not because he was so horrible in math, but because when he was taking math online, it was very self-taught. Uh, he would watch videos, he would see how to do things, but if he had a question about not understanding how to do this particular equation, he would not really be able to get any kind of thorough answer from a teacher. He found that it was a lot easier for him to review the lesson online and then have his tutor come and review it with him on a one on one basis. And then it just clicked. He got it. Why? Because he not only had FLVS teaching him visually, but then he had someone come to the house and sit down with him and show him in their way how to figure out these equations. And he did great. For my son, who suffered from anxiety in elementary school, and I saw what transpired with him and the self soothing that he had to do to himself just to get through because of FCAT. I said to myself, there's got to be a way for him to learn coping skills because the world pretty much sucks. It sucks so bad right now, and it just kind of sucks in general. I did not want to be one of those mothers, one of those parents that said, I'm taking my kid out and I want to protect him. And I'm a helicopter parent. Trust me when I tell you, working at a high school, I came across many parents that not only did and did and did for their children, but protected them at any cost. And that was very disheartening to me to see. And it happened more often than you think. Being in the middle of it all and dealing with parents all of the time, I saw it, and it was very disturbing to me because all it did to me was reinforce that these children are never going to be able to figure things out on their own. How are they going to deal with life once they're out of school, once they're out of college? Or what if they don't want to go to college? They need to be able to deal with and cope with specific things that come their way. And I didn't want to be one of those moms that took that from my son. I wanted him to have some stress. I wanted him to have some anxiety so he could learn how to cope with it. So, what could I do as my job as a mother? Well, the one thing I thought of was, okay, so he's doing virtual. Great. He's also going to school. Great. He still has some anxiety. Everyone, does. And if people say they don't, they're full of shit. He had some anxiety. Okay. So what is it that can be done? Well, I taught him coping skills. I had suffered from anxiety many, many years ago, and I actually went to see somebody many years ago. I mean, I'm talking like in my early 20s. And this one doctor I saw for a year, he was a doctor who specifically helped people with things like anxiety, OCD, things like that. Now, what he did was he helped me teach myself how to deal with specific situations. I had no idea how to deal with my stress, my anxiety. I started working at a very young age while all of my friends were finishing up college. I was done. I was ready to start living my life and making money and working in corporate, which I did. That's a whole other story. So, this doctor back in New York was phenomenal. And all of those coping skills I learned, I managed to help myself through so many different situations. Sometimes it was much more tough than other situations, but I still figured it out. So as my son was growing up, I started teaching him these coping skills. What can he do to help himself? Well, he pretty much figured out how to self-soothe, but some of the things that he was doing to help himself might not have been good to do in certain places. So, what could he do to help himself? And I taught him coping skills. What did it do? Well, my son's 24 years old now. And when he was younger, he would go to the mall and he would get sick to his stomach having to socialize and be with other kids. He didn't have a social issue, which is what the problem was. He didn't have social anxiety, but yet he still did get anxious when he would go to a place with other people. He was more self conscious than I would say having social anxiety. So teaching him specific um, skills was, I think, enough to help him just really learn to grow and deal with the situation. So, parents, please, okay, you need to start recognizing when you are doing too much for your children and pull back on it because I promise you that if you don't, it's going to be far worse when they're adults and you want them out of the house and they're not leaving because that is due in part to you. I am telling you, the best thing you can do right now in making a decision for your children is to help them out in the best way possible. We're all fucking up and we're all making mistakes and we're all growing and we're all learning from it. My son did better with virtual in his core classes. So I am someone that is all for virtual. There are people that kept saying, oh, well, what about him being social? He's hardly going to school, yada, yada, yada. No, guys, it doesn't mean that there's something that's going to happen to your children. I keep reading about, I don't know what to do with my kids or they're suffering because they're not at school. Okay, so you're telling me that school is the only way to socialize your children? I mean, come on, guys. This is a little ridiculous. Yeah, I think going to school, public school, a traditional brick and mortar is definitely the way to go for many. But just because it's not happening right now does not mean that your children really are going to, quote, suffer. This is all I keep reading about. People who want their children to go to school without wearing masks. Listen, it is what it is right now. There's nothing we can do about it. So we all just need to make a conscious group effort to support one another. I think that it's more of an inconvenience for the parents who don't want their children to stay at home. I also truly believe and completely understand that there are parents that have to work. What are they going to do with their children now that they're at home? What are they going to do? The whole thing sucks, but it doesn't mean that virtual is the worst thing in the world. As a matter of fact, you might start finding that your children will thrive doing virtual. And I'm not talking about what they're doing with their teachers right now. I'm not talking about the Zoom classes and the Google Meets. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about actual virtual, not remote with your children one on one with the teachers. I'm talking about actual virtual, like Florida virtual or Palm Beach virtual, where they're actually sitting there and they're doing their own work at their own pace, at their own time, with their own schedule. You would not realize it until it happens, but these are huge responsibilities and tasks that your children need to start to undertake. And we had a whiteboard, and my son would write down all of his assignments that he would need to do for the week and at what times he chose he wanted to do these things. And he would do it, and that would be it. There were a lot of flaws, and the first few months were really difficult for him to start learning how to be responsible for this. But in the end, he wound up being a very organized uh, young man who is now working full time, making good money, and I'm very proud of him because I truly think that it helped. Now, this is only my point of view, but all I'm trying to do is to tell you that virtual can be a perfect fit for some people. And there are ways of doing both virtual and public once brick and mortar opens up. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me via email, and I will be more than happy to discuss this with you. I have spoken to so many people, so many of my friends whose children have had to turn to virtual for one reason or another. And many of them had the exact same response. Oh my God, what am I going to do with him at home? Or, oh my God, what am I going to do because he's going to be socially inept? Okay, no, none of that's going to happen. I just think that we all need to take a step back and realize that we have so many other options. I wish that this option was around when I was a student because I know I would have done a lot better in school than typical brick and mortar. I would have loved to have had the option, the opportunity to not only do virtual but still go to school because then I would have been able to focus on my own without any stress doing, let's say, history, which for some reason I just did not do well in because it was all memorization. I mean, I didn't do horribly, but I didn't do great. But when I think about being on virtual and being able to take your time to do it, why not choose something like that? I think we all do a lot better when there's less stress around us. So, anyway, it's a great option. I do agree with it. I'm glad that you all stopped by. Have a great day.